The security officer's badge said Harvard Station Transit Authority, which was a long way of saying he was the fourth man that morning to tell me I couldn't have a dog in the transit hold. Gus didn't look up. He had his chin on my left boot and his eyes were more closed than open, which for Gus was his natural expression when nothing was actively on fire. His ears hung loose. His tail was still. The carrier I'd check him in was sitting empty behind my bench because Gus had not wanted to use the carrier, and I hadn't wanted to fight him about it at 6 in the morning, and the carrier was now a prop. "Sir," the officer said again. His name tag said veteran. He had 4 arms, which he was using to hold a datapad, a citation stylus, a scan wand, and his own lapel all at once. "I need you to return the animal to its registered container." "He knows about the container," I said. "He's made his position clear." "Sir." 14 years, officer. He sat in that carrier for 14 years. He's expressing his opinion. Veteran looked at Gus. Gus breathed at him. It was an inhale, a long pause, and an exhale, performed with the gravity of a man who had seen things. "The animal is required under Section 7 of the Harvard Transit Code to be enclosed in a bio-approved containment structure during layover periods. Yes." I'd read the sign. "The container is approved. It's right there. He's choosing not to be in it. He's a dog, not a violation." Veteran looked at the carrier. He looked at Gus. He did something with his face that I took to mean he was computing whether this was worth the rest of his morning. I've had that same conversation on 3 planets and 2 orbital stations. It always goes the same way. They come in certain and they leave calculating. Veteran left and got a supervisor. The supervisor was a broader specimen, pale green, and he came with 2 colleagues who stationed themselves near the door in what I thought was meant to communicate authority. He introduced himself as Senior Compliance Officer Drathvos. He held the datapad like evidence. "Mr. Solon." He'd looked up my transit file. "You've declared the animal as a companion animal, domesticated, Class C." "He is." Class C registration requires enclosed containment at all transit points. He's in the transit point. He's touching the container. I'd call that approximate containment. Drathvos did not appreciate that. "Sir, we've had reports of an unregistered biological." He stopped, looked at Gus again, adjusted his phrasing. "Asset, in the open concourse. This is a mixed species transit hub. We have obligations." "He's a beagle." "I'm not familiar with that classification." "It's a breed. Earth breed. He weighs about 14 kilograms. He is currently asleep on my foot." Gus was not technically asleep. His ears had moved a fraction when Voss raised his voice, but the ears had resettled, and his tail had made one slow rotation against the floor and stopped, which many had assessed the situation and found it insufficient to act on. "We are going to need to have the animal assessed," Voss said. "I can save you the trouble. He's old, he's got arthritis in his back hips, and his teeth could use a cleaning. I'm a veterinarian. Retired. I've been doing his annual checks myself for the last 6 years." "That is not the kind of assessment I meant, Mr. Solon." I knew what kind of assessment he meant. He's not going in a cage. "Sir." He spent the first 3 years of his life in a cage. At a facility. Before I got him. He doesn't do cages. I kept my voice flat. Not angry. Just factual. The way you talk to someone who needs information, not a fight. "You want to assess him, send someone down here. He'll let you look at him. He might lean on your leg if he likes your smell. He probably won't." Voss put the datapad down at his side and looked at his 2 colleagues. A silent conversation happened. Then he excused himself to make a call, and the 2 colleagues stayed. I ate the last of the travel crackers I had in my jacket pocket and gave Gus the final piece, which he took from my palm with the careful politeness he'd had since he was 3. That was one of the things about Gus. He'd always eaten carefully. Like he understood that taking was different from being offered. 30 minutes passed. My gate was in 2 hours. I was not worried about the gate. What came next was a team. Not 2 colleagues. A team, 4 officers in a different color of uniform, transit blue instead of compliance gray, with a wheeled containment unit that looked like someone had engineered it for something considerably larger than a beagle. It had the Harvard Transit Authority seal on the side and a biometric locking panel and enough ventilation grating for an animal that needed a lot of oxygen in a hurry. The team leader crouched to a lower eye level, which I respected as a technique, and addressed me without the impatience Voss had settled into. Mr. Solon.
EM containment specialist Norakel.
We've had some concerns flagged about your companion animal. What kind of concerns? The biometric system logged an anomalous signature when the animal entered the hub. I looked at Gus. Gus was now fully awake, blinking at Kel with the mild curiosity of a dog who finds most things in the universe only moderately interesting and is willing to give new things a few seconds before deciding they fall in the same category. What kind of anomalous signature? Predator index scoring, Kel said carefully. Outside registered parameters for Class C companion animals. He's old, I said. Sometimes the calibration reads older tissue as. Mr. Solon. Her voice was still professional. The score was 9.4 out of 10. I didn't say anything to that. Class C companion animals register between 0.1 and 0.8, she continued. The highest score I've personally seen on a registered companion animal was 2.2, and that was a working security breed, not a, she looked at Gus again, not a dog of his apparent age and size. What score does your containment specialist handle? I asked. She paused. Excuse me. The biometric system. The same system that scored Gus. What score does it give your containment team? Another pause. A longer one. Trained transit security scores in the 4 to 6 range. Gusyanet. It was a full, slow yawn, the kind that showed all his teeth and took about 3 seconds and ended with a small sound in the back of his throat, and then he lowered his chin back to my boot and closed his eyes again. Kel watched the yawn. He's retired, I said. That's what the 9.4 is. He's not performing anymore. He hasn't been for 4 years. He is, most of the time, asleep. I reached down and put my hand on the back of his neck, which he tolerated without opening his eyes. I'd like to make my flight. Kel stood up. She looked at the containment unit, and then at her team, and I could see her doing the same arithmetic Vethran had done, except now the numbers were different. She did not leave. She made another call. I have never been able to decide whether the escalation instinct in bureaucracies is a design flaw or a feature. On one interpretation, it's the system correcting for uncertainty, each level too cautious to absorb a judgment call, passing it up until someone senior enough makes the call and absorbs the risk. On the other interpretation, it is fear. Each person too uncomfortable with what they're looking at to let it be their problem, so they hand it to someone larger. Gus had this effect on systems. Not because he did anything, because the systems looked at him and could not locate him in any category they trusted. The someone larger, this time, was a handler. He came from the port's working animal division, and he was one of the big barrel-chested species I'd seen on Harveth, grey-blue skin, 4 legs, 2 arms, with a face that sat flat and wide and communicated nothing. He had a vest with a lot of patches on it, and behind him, on a leash made of braided cable, was his animal. I'd seen keth-hounds in documentation, but not in person. They are indigenous to the Keth Reach system, which apparently has the atmospheric pressure and average terrain of what Earth would describe as the inside of a blender. The keth-hound is built accordingly, low to the ground relative to its mass, heavily muscled through the back and neck, with a hide in overlapping plates that are technically skin but function closer to light armor. The head is wide and carries an olfactory array that the literature describes as being able to parse molecular signatures at 1 to 10 parts per billion. They are used in Harveth Station's working animal division for customs inspection and threat assessment. They do not, according to anything I'd read, sit down voluntarily in a professional context. The handler brought the keth-hound to about 8 meters from where Gus and I were sitting. Standard assessment distance. I'd seen it done with other animals. You bring the working animal in at range, let it read the air, and if the working animal signals clear, the situation is cleared. The keth-hound stopped. Not the controlled stop of an animal receiving a command. A full, total stop, the kind where all 4 legs go still and the head comes up in the ears, or what functioned as ears, in that armored case, rotate to full orientation. The hide plates along its spine shifted. Not aggression. Something else. Gus opened one eye. He looked at the keth-hound. The keth-hound looked at him. The whole concourse, which had been doing the ordinary business of a transit hub, had gone quiet in the way that crowds go quiet when the thing happening is somehow below the frequency they can consciously process but their bodies have already heard. The handler gave a low command in his language. Nothing. The keth-hound did not move. He gave a second command, firmer. The keth-hound took one step forward, slowly, like a question, and then stopped again, closer to the floor than before. Gus closed his eye. The keth-hound sat down. Not a trained sit. A slow, deliberate folding of the legs, the way an animal sits when it has made a considered decision and is announcing it. It sat, and it put its wide head forward and down, and it did not get up. The handler looked at his animal for a long time. Then he looked at Gus. Then he looked at me. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The keth-hound had said it. He walked to his animal and crouched beside it and put a hand on its side. The animal's hide plates were still. Whatever it had read in the air in this concourse, it had read it, and it had made its assessment, and the assessment was final, and the assessment was that there was nothing to be done here except sit, and acknowledge, and wait for the old one to be finished doing whatever he was doing, which was sleeping on a man's boot in a transit hub. The handler stood up. He looked at Kel. She looked at him. "Mr. Solon," Kel said, after a moment, "I'm going to need you to fill out a secondary registration form." I filled out a registration form. A supplemental.
Fine.
The form was 4 pages. I filled it out on the datapad Veteran had left on the bench earlier, which nobody had retrieved. Under species I wrote *beagle. Under breed classification I wrote *hound group, senhound, domesticated. Under threat tier I wrote *retired. Under purpose I wrote *companion. Under handler credentials I wrote *d.v.m, retired. 29 years small animal and working dog practice. Under additional notes I wrote he is 14 years old and he has not bitten anyone in 6 years and the last one had it coming and I would prefer not to discuss that on a form. I handed the datapad to Kel. She read it without expression, which is a skill that transit security develops and which I respect. "The handler," I said, while she was reading. "His animal. Is it going to be all right?" She looked up. "It sat down in an assessment situation," I said. "That's going to go in a report somewhere. I don't want his animal flagged for a calibration issue because of Gus." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "That's your concern right now." "He's a working animal," I said. "His assessment was accurate. He's not broken. The assessment came back correct. It would be wrong to log it as a malfunction." Kel looked at the handler across the concourse, who was still sitting beside his keth-hound with one hand on the animal's side. The keth-hound had not moved. "I'll note it as an accurate environmental read," she said. "Not a malfunction." "Thank you." She handed the datapad back. "Gate 14. Boards in 40 minutes. You'll want to move." I stood up, which took a moment because Gus had been on my foot and needed to register that the foot was leaving. He stood up, too, the way he does now. Back legs first, then the front, 1 second for the hips to find their confidence. He shook himself once, the full body tremor that goes from his ears to the tip of his tail, and then he stood and looked at me with the expression he's had since the day I got him, which is the expression of a dog who would like to know where we are going but has already decided he's going there. I clipped his leash to his collar. He walked with me toward gate 14, and the concourse made room, though nobody quite understood why they were doing it. Behind us, I heard the keth-hound handler speaking quietly to his animal in that low language of his. I don't speak Keth. I don't know what he said. But a moment later I heard the keth-hound get up, and the sound of its clawed feet on the station floor as it rose. Gus didn't look back. He never does. He's 14 years old and his hips are bad and his muzzle has gone the color of old snow, and most days what he wants is a patch of sun and something to put his chin on, and most days I find him both. But I've known him long enough to know that somewhere under the chin on boot and the slow yawn and the one I opened to check the room is the thing the biometric scanner found, and the thing the keth-hound sat down for, and I know better than to think those are different things from the dog who ate gently from my hand this morning. They're not different things. They never were. He's just retired. We made our flight with 12 minutes to spare. Gus took the window seat, put his chin on the armrest, and watched the station lights pull away through the port glass until we hit transit and there was nothing to see. Then he closed his eyes. I put my hand on his back and he sighed, long and slow, the way he does when he's decided everything is fine. Everything was fine.